The transport ship landed with a heavy thud on the dusty ground of Kepler 442b. Lisa Wang stepped out into the alien air, her breathing mask fogging slightly in the humid atmosphere. The planet smelled of metal and decay, even through the filtration. System. Red mountains stretched across the horizon, their peaks disappearing into thick purple clouds. Mining station. Eco 7 sat like a metal island in the middle of a vast wilderness. 12 humans had called this place home for 6 months, extracting rare minerals from deep underground. The station looked small against the massive landscape, its white walls gleaming under the orange sun. Marcus Reed waited for her at the landing pad. He was a big man with scars on his hands and a serious expression that never seemed to change. As head of security, he had kept the mining crew alive in a world that wanted them dead. "Dr. Wang," he said, shaking her hand firmly, "welcome to hell." Lisa smiled despite his grim tone. She had come here to study the planet's life forms, particularly the predators that had been causing problems for the mining operation. Her specialty was understanding how alien creatures thought and behaved. Marcus led her through the main compound. The hallways were narrow and practical, with thick metal walls designed to keep dangerous things outside. Other crew members nodded. As they passed, their faces showing the weariness of people living on constant alert. "We have protocols," Marcus explained as they walked. "No one goes outside alone. No one goes out after dark. No one ventures beyond the perimeter markers. These rules have kept us alive." They stopped at a large window overlooking the surrounding forest. The trees were strange things, with black bark and silver leaves that moved without wind. Between them, shadows shifted in ways that made Lisa's eyes water when she tried to focus. "What exactly are we dealing with?" she asked. Marcus pulled up a holographic display showing blurry images of creatures moving through the underbrush. "We call them stalkers. Imagine a wolf bred with a spider, then made as smart as a human. They hunt in packs, they use tools, and they learn from their mistakes." The images showed creatures roughly the size of large dogs, but with 8 legs and mandibles that could snap through metal. Their eyes reflected light like mirrors, and they moved with a fluid grace that seemed impossible for something so large. "How many attacks have there been?" Lisa asked. "That's the strange part," Marcus said. "No direct attacks yet. They probe our defenses, test our reactions, but they always pull back before we can engage. It's like they're studying us." Lisa felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's air conditioning. In her years of studying alien predators, she had learned that the truly dangerous ones were those that thought before they killed. Over the following days, Lisa settled into the station's routine. She reviewed surveillance footage, analyzed behavioral patterns, and studied the few biological samples the crew had managed to collect. The stalkers were clearly intelligent, but their intelligence was different from human thinking. They operated with a cold, calculating logic that reminded her more of a computer than an animal. Tom Bradley, the station's chief engineer, showed her the damage the creatures had caused. Power cables cut with surgical precision. Equipment sabotaged in ways that suggested deep understanding of human technology. Sensor arrays repositioned to create blind spots. "They're not just breaking things randomly," Tom explained. "They understand our systems better than some of our own crew members." Lisa spent hours watching the security feeds. The stalkers moved through the forest like ghosts, appearing and disappearing without warning. They communicated through subsonic frequencies that her equipment could barely detect. When they gathered in groups, their movements became synchronized in ways that suggested a hive-mind intelligence, but what worried her most was the pattern she began to see in their behavior. The stalkers weren't just learning about the station's defenses, they were learning about humans themselves. How they moved, how they reacted to threats, how they made decisions under pressure. On her 5th night at the station, 2 miners named Rick and Dave went missing during a routine survey of the eastern mineral deposits. They had followed all protocols, stayed within the perimeter, maintained radio contact. Then their signals simply disappeared. The search team found their bodies 3 days later, deep in the forest where no human should have been able to travel. But the condition of the bodies made Lisa's blood run cold. They hadn't been eaten or torn apart in the usual manner of predator kills. Instead, they had been carefully dissected as if something had been studying their anatomy. This isn't normal. Predator behavior, Lisa told Marcus that evening. Predators kill for food, territory, or self-defense. They don't perform autopsies. Marcus stared at the photographs of the crime scene. Then what are they doing? Lisa had a theory, but it was too horrible to voice immediately. She spent the night reviewing everything she knew about the stalkers, cross-referencing their behavior with data from other frontier worlds. What she found in the colonial databases made her hands shake. The next morning, she called an emergency meeting with the senior staff. Marcus, Tom, and the other department heads gathered in the conference room, their faces reflecting the strain of constant vigilance. "I need to show you something," Lisa said, activating the main display. "The stalkers aren't native to this planet." The screen showed star charts and colonial reports from 17 different worlds. Each one told the same story. Intelligent predators appearing on frontier planets, systematic harassment of human settlements, careful study of human behavior, then sudden, coordinated attacks that left no survivors. "They're an invasive species," Lisa continued. "They move from world to world, studying the dominant life forms, then eliminating them. They've never failed." The room fell silent. Through the reinforced windows, they could see the forest moving in the wind. But now Lisa wondered how much of that movement was actually wind. "How long do we have?" Marcus asked quietly. Lisa looked at the data again. On every previous world, the pattern was the same. Months of observation, followed by harassment, followed by the killing of isolated individuals for study. Then came the final assault. "Based on their previous behavior," she said, "I estimate we have less than 2 weeks before they attack in force." Marcus immediately began planning an evacuation, but Lisa stopped him with a raised hand. She had realized something that made evacuation impossible. "They're not just studying us to kill us," she said. "They're studying us to understand how to kill all humans. We're their test case for attacking human colonies across this entire sector." The weight of that realization settled over the room like a heavy blanket. They weren't just fighting for their own lives. They were fighting for the lives of millions of humans who didn't even know this threat existed. Outside, something howled in the forest. It was a sound like metal scraping against stone, and it seemed to come from everywhere at once. The harassment began 3 days after Lisa's revelation. It started small, external sensors going offline during the night shift. Power fluctuations that lasted just long enough to be noticed, strange scratching sounds against the outer walls. That stopped whenever someone went to investigate. Lisa watched it all from the security center, documenting every incident. The stalkers were escalating their activities according to a precise schedule. They were testing human responses, measuring reaction times, cataloging defensive capabilities. "They cut the main power line again," Tom reported over the intercom. "3rd time this week." "But they're not just cutting it randomly. They're learning how quickly we can repair it." Marcus paced the security center like a caged animal. Every instinct told him to fight, but there was nothing to fight yet. The stalkers remained shadows in the forest, always just beyond the reach of their weapons. "We need to call for backup," he said for the 100th time. Lisa shook her head. "Any rescue ship would take weeks to get here. By then, the stalkers will have learned everything they need to know about human military tactics, too." The psychological pressure was beginning to show on the crew. People jumped at shadows, spoke in whispers, and avoided looking out the windows. The station felt smaller each day, as if the walls were slowly closing in. On the 6th day of harassment, the stalkers made their first direct contact. Dr. Roberts, the station's medical officer, was working in the external lab when something tapped on the reinforced window. She looked up to see a stalker standing just outside, its mirror-like eyes fixed on her face. The creature made no aggressive moves. It simply watched her work for several minutes, its head tilting from side to side as if trying to understand her actions. When Roberts slowly reached for the emergency alarm, the stalker raised one clawed appendage and tapped the window again. 3 deliberate strikes. Then it vanished back into the forest. It was mimicking me, Roberts told the emergency assembly. When I moved my hand, it moved its claw in the same pattern. It was learning my gestures. Lisa felt her stomach clench. The stalkers weren't just studying human technology and tactics. They were studying human body language, learning to read emotions and intentions. They were preparing for psychological warfare. The attacks on isolated personnel began the next week. The stalkers never struck at groups, only at individuals who had somehow become separated from their teams. They would disable communications first, then hunting lights, then approach their target with careful deliberation. Bill Harper, one of the mining supervisors, was the first to survive an encounter. He had been checking equipment near the perimeter when his radio died and the lights went out. In the darkness, he heard the soft clicking of multiple sets of claws against metal. They surrounded me, he told Lisa later, his hands still shaking. But they didn't attack. They just circled me. For maybe 10 minutes, getting closer and closer. I could smell them, this metallic scent like old blood. Then suddenly they were gone. Lisa interviewed every survivor, building a profile of stalker behavior. They were conducting experiments, testing human fear responses, measuring how long it took for panic to set in. Each encounter was slightly different, as if they were working through a checklist of psychological variables. The breakthrough came when Lisa analyzed the subsonic communications the creatures used. The station's sensitive equipment could barely detect the low-frequency pulses, but with enough processing power, she began to decode patterns. The stalkers weren't just talking to each other. They were sending detailed reports to something else, something much larger that was coordinating their activities from a distance. The local pack was just the advance team for a much larger force. How many are we really dealing with? Marcus asked when Lisa showed him the data. Lisa pointed to the frequency analysis charts. Based on the communication traffic, I estimate at least 300 stalkers within a 50-kilometer radius. But that's not the worst part. She switched to a different display showing seismic readings from the past month. The data revealed massive movement patterns in the deep forest, creatures traveling in coordinated groups toward their location. They're not just studying us, Lisa said. They're preparing for a full-scale assault. Everything they've learned about human behavior is being passed up the chain of command to plan the perfect attack. The station's AI systems confirmed her worst fears. Long-range sensors detected heat signatures moving through the forest in organized formations. Hundreds of stalkers were converging on mining station Eco 7, but they were taking their time, positioning themselves with military precision. We're not just facing predators, Lisa realized. We're facing an army. The psychological pressure intensified as the crew became aware of how badly they were outnumbered. Sleep became impossible as strange sounds echoed through the forest at night. During the day, shadows seemed to move independently of the trees. That cast them, Dr. Roberts reported, increasing cases of anxiety and depression among the crew. People were losing their ability to concentrate, making mistakes that could have proven fatal in normal circumstances. The stalkers were wearing them down without firing a single shot, but Lisa noticed something else in the behavioral data. The stalkers themselves seemed confused by certain human responses. When Bill Harper had been surrounded but not attacked, the creatures had withdrawn earlier than their previous patterns suggested they should have. When Dr. Roberts had maintained eye contact instead of looking away in fear, the stalker at her window had hesitated before disappearing. "They're learning about us," she told Marcus, "but we're not behaving the way their previous victims did. Humans are responding in ways they didn't expect." Marcus studied the security footage of recent encounters. "What kind of ways?" Lisa pulled up psychological profiles from the 17 worlds the stalkers had previously conquered. The dominant species on those planets had all followed predictable patterns when threatened. They gathered in groups, they built stronger defenses, they tried to hide or fight using conventional tactics. "But humans don't just respond to threats," Lisa said. "We adapt, we learn. We change our behavior based on new information." She showed him data from the past 2 weeks. Despite the constant harassment, the mining crew had continued working. continued maintaining their equipment, continued following their duties. They were afraid, but they weren't paralyzed by fear. The stalkers expected us to break down by now, Lisa realized. Their timeline assumes psychological collapse followed by military defeat, but we're still functioning as a unit. Marcus looked at the data with new understanding. They're behind schedule. Lisa nodded. Which means they're going to have to adapt their strategy. And adaptation creates opportunities for mistakes. Outside, the howling in the forest had grown more frequent and more complex. The stalkers were calling to their reinforcements, but there was something different in their communications now. Lisa detected subtle changes in the frequency patterns, variations that suggested uncertainty or frustration. They're learning about us, she said quietly, but we're learning about them too. The question was whether they could learn fast enough to survive what was coming. The seismic readings showed the main stalker force would reach their position within days. Whatever plan Lisa was forming, she would have to implement it soon. As night fell over mining station Eco 7, Lisa stood at the observation window watching the forest. Somewhere out there, hundreds of intelligent predators were preparing to test everything they had learned about human nature, but they had never encountered a human willing to let them learn the wrong lessons. Lisa stared at the tactical display showing red dots surrounding mining station Eco 7. 300 stalkers had taken positions in a perfect circle around their location, maintaining a distance of exactly 2 kilometers. They weren't hiding anymore. They wanted the humans to know they were trapped. Final assault begins at dawn, Marcus said, checking his weapons for the 10th time. That's the pattern from every other world. The crew had spent the night preparing defenses, but everyone knew the truth. 12 humans against 300 intelligent predators was not a fight they could win through conventional means. The stalkers had studied human military tactics for months. They knew exactly how the defenders would respond. Lisa had been working through the night on a different kind of preparation. She sat in the medical bay, reviewing everything she had learned about stalker biology and behavior. Her plan was insane, but it was based on one crucial observation that everyone else had missed. The stalkers were cautious predators. They studied their prey extensively before attacking because they couldn't afford to make mistakes. In their long history of conquest, they had never encountered resistance that cost them significant casualties. They won through intelligence, not brute force. "Dr. Wang," Marcus called over the intercom, "you need to get to the safe room." "We're sealing the compound in 10 minutes. Lisa didn't respond. Instead, she gathered her medical kit and recording equipment. She had been studying the stalkers for weeks, but she realized now that all her research was based on observation from a distance. To truly understand them, she needed closer contact. She made her way to the main airlock where Marcus was coordinating the final defense preparations. When he saw her equipment, his face went pale. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "The stalkers have never faced a species that would deliberately allow itself to be harmed for information," Lisa said calmly. "They base all their strategies on the assumption that prey will try to avoid damage at all costs." Marcus stepped in front of the airlock controls. "You're not going out there." Lisa met his eyes steadily. "They're going to attack at dawn regardless of what we do. Our defenses won't hold for more than an hour against those numbers. But if I can gather data on their biology and behavior patterns, we might find a weakness. By letting them kill you? By letting them try?" Tom Bradley had been listening from the control station. "Lisa, this is suicide. Even if you learn something useful, you won't live long enough to share it." Lisa held up a small recording device and a medical sensor array. "I don't need to survive? I just need to transmit data back to the station before they finish me off." The logic was brutal but sound. The stalkers would attack the station whether she went outside or not. But if she could provide intelligence about their methods and capabilities, the remaining crew might be able to mount a more effective defense. Marcus struggled with the decision for several long moments. Finally, he stepped aside. "If you're determined to do this, at least take a weapon." Lisa shook her head. Weapons would make them cautious. I need them to think I'm helpless. She sealed her recording equipment in a waterproof case and activated the medical sensors that would monitor her vital signs and transmit the data back to the station. Then she stepped into the airlock. The night air of Kepler 442b was cold and filled with strange scents. Lisa walked slowly away from the station, making no attempt to hide or move quietly. She wanted the stalkers to know she was coming. She didn't have to wait long. The forest around her filled with the soft clicking of claws against metal and stone. Red eyes reflected starlight from the darkness between the trees. The stalkers were curious about this unexpected behavior. Lisa reached a small clearing about 100 meters from the station and stopped. She set down her equipment case and activated the recording systems. Then she sat on the ground and waited. The first stalker emerged from the tree line slowly, its 8 legs moving with liquid grace. It was larger than the others she had seen. Probably an alpha male based on the scarring around its mandibles. Lisa designated it as Prime in her mind. Prime approached to within 10 meters and stopped, its mirror-like eyes studying her intently. Other stalkers moved in the shadows around the clearing, but they maintained their distance. This was clearly some kind of test or evaluation. Lisa spoke in a calm, steady voice, knowing her words were being recorded. Subject appears to be the pack leader, estimated weight 150 kilograms. Mandible span approximately 60 centimeters. Behavior suggests high intelligence and extreme caution. Prime tilted its head at the sound of her voice, then moved closer. Lisa could smell the metallic scent that Bill Harper had described, like old blood mixed with ozone. The creature's breathing made a soft hissing sound when Prime was within 5 meters. Lisa made her move. Instead of running or cowering, she extended her left arm toward the creature in a gesture of offering. The stalker froze, clearly confused by this unprecedented behavior. It had studied human defensive patterns for months, but this action fell outside every parameter it understood. Prey animals didn't offer themselves to predators. For several minutes, Prime simply stared at Lisa's extended arm. Other stalkers emerged from the forest, forming a loose circle around the clearing. They communicated through subsonic pulses that Lisa's equipment recorded, but their body language showed uncertainty. Finally, Prime moved forward and grasped Lisa's arm with its mandibles. The bite was precise and controlled, penetrating skin and muscle but avoiding major blood vessels. Venom flowed into the wound, and Lisa felt fire racing through her nervous system, but she didn't scream or try to pull away. Instead, she continued, speaking into her recorder, describing the sensation and effects of the venom while maintaining direct eye contact with Prime. Neurotoxin causing severe pain but no immediate paralysis, she said through gritted teeth. Creature appears confused by lack of fear response. This is not following their predicted behavioral model. Prime released her arm and stepped back, making a series of rapid clicking sounds that brought the other stalkers closer. They were clearly communicating about this strange encounter, trying to understand what had just happened. Lisa felt the venom working through her system, but the effects weren't what she had expected. Instead of the paralysis and organ failure that should have incapacitated her within minutes, she experienced a massive surge of adrenaline and heightened awareness. Her heart rate increased dramatically, but her thinking became clearer rather than clouded. Unexpected physiological response, she recorded. Human biochemistry appears to be incompatible with their venom in ways that might be advantageous. Prime moved closer again, apparently deciding to complete the kill. But Lisa's enhanced reflexes allowed her to roll aside at the last second. The creature's strike missed by inches, and its confusion was evident in the way it pulled back to reassess the situation. The other stalkers began making agitated sounds. This was clearly not how their prey was supposed to behave after envenomation. Lisa used her enhanced state to stand up and face Prime directly. "Your venom doesn't work on us the way you think it does," she said. Knowing the creature couldn't understand her words, but hoping it would comprehend her tone and posture. "You made a mistake." Prime seemed to understand that something fundamental had gone wrong with its attack. It made a complex series of subsonic calls, and the other stalkers began to withdraw toward the tree line. Within minutes, the clearing was empty except for Lisa. She stumbled back toward the station, her arm throbbing but her mind working with crystal clarity. The venom was still in her system, but instead of killing her, it was enhancing her cognitive abilities and physical responses in ways that the stalkers had never encountered. Marcus and Tom were waiting at the airlock with Dr. Roberts and a full medical team. They rushed her to the medical bay, where Roberts began treating the bite wound while Lisa continued recording her observations. The venom interacts with human brain chemistry differently than with their previous victims, she explained as Roberts worked. Instead of neural shutdown, we get enhanced function. They've been testing their primary weapon on the wrong species. Dr. Roberts ran blood tests while monitoring Lisa's vital signs. Your adrenaline levels are off the charts, but your cognitive function is actually improving. How do you feel? Lisa considered the question carefully. The pain in her arm was manageable, and her thinking was sharper than it had ever been. More importantly, she could see patterns in the stalker behavior that had been invisible before. I can see their weaknesses, she said. They operate on predictable algorithms. Their intelligence is real, but it follows rigid patterns. If we can disrupt those patterns, we can turn their own strategies against them. Marcus leaned forward. What kind of disruption? Lisa smiled, though it probably looked frightening with the venom still affecting her system. We're going to teach them to hunt phantoms while we prepare the real trap. Outside, the forest had fallen silent. The stalkers were regrouping, trying to understand what had gone wrong with their carefully planned test. For the first time in their long history of conquest, they had encountered prey that became more dangerous when wounded. Dawn was still hours away, but Lisa knew they had already changed the fundamental equation of the coming battle. The stalkers thought they understood human nature, but they had never met a human willing to sacrifice herself to teach them. How wrong they were. Lisa worked through the remaining hours before dawn with an intensity that amazed her colleagues. The stalker venom had transformed her mind into a processing machine, allowing her to see patterns and connections that had been invisible before the bite. Their communication system is based on mathematical frequencies, she explained to the assembled crew, her voice rapid but precise. Each pack member has a specific harmonic signature. When they coordinate attacks, they use overlapping frequency bursts to create complex tactical instructions. Tom Bradley stared at the analysis scrolling across his engineering displays. You figured all this out in 3 hours? Lisa nodded, though the movement made her enhanced nervous system send sparks of sensation through her body. The venom doesn't just boost adrenaline. It increases neural connectivity by approximately 400%. I can see relationships in the data that would normally take weeks to identify. Dr. Roberts had been monitoring Lisa's condition closely. Your blood chemistry is stabilizing, but the cognitive enhancement appears to be permanent. Whatever that venom did to your brain, it created new neural pathways that aren't going away. Marcus interrupted with tactical concerns. That's fascinating, but we have maybe 2 hours before they attack. Can you translate this knowledge into something that keeps us alive? Lisa turned to the communications array with a smile that was equal parts brilliant and terrifying. Better than that? I can teach their own language to lie to them. She began working with Tom to modify the station's external speakers, calibrating them to produce the subsonic frequencies the stalkers used for coordination. The process was complex, requiring precise understanding of how the creature's communication protocols worked. Every stalker pack operates with a command hierarchy, Lisa explained as she worked. Alpha commands, betas relay orders, workers execute instructions. But the system assumes that all communications are authentic. They've never encountered false signals before. Tom understood immediately. You want to hack their communication network? More than that, Lisa said. I want to reprogram their attack algorithms. Working with enhanced speed and clarity, Lisa created a series of false signals that would mimic authentic stalker communications. The messages were designed to send different parts of the attacking force to incorrect positions, creating gaps in their coordination, but she wasn't stopping there. The venom-enhanced analysis had revealed something crucial about stalker psychology. They were intelligent, but their intelligence was highly specialized. They excelled at studying prey and planning attacks, but they struggled with adaptation. When their plans went wrong, they're like computers running very sophisticated software, Lisa explained. But if you introduce unexpected variables into their programming, they don't adapt quickly. They freeze up while trying to process the new information. Lisa spent the next hour creating what she called a confusion protocol, false signals that would make the stalkers think they were receiving contradictory orders from multiple alpha leaders. In their rigid hierarchy, this kind of conflict would create a temporary paralysis as they tried to determine which commands to follow. Meanwhile, Marcus and the security team prepared physical defenses based on Lisa's analysis of stalker movement patterns. Instead of random obstacles, they created a maze of barriers designed to funnel attacking creatures into predetermined killing zones. They attack in waves of exactly 7 individuals, Lisa told them. Each wave follows precise geometric patterns based on their prey's expected responses. But if we respond differently than expected, their formations become liabilities instead of advantages. Tom had been working on a modification to the station's mining equipment. The industrial laser cutters used for mineral extraction could be repurposed as weapons, but only if they knew exactly where the targets would be. With Lisa's movement predictions, we can pre-target the laser arrays, he explained. When the stalkers follow their attack patterns, they'll walk directly into focused energy beams. Dr. Roberts had been preparing for casualties, but Lisa's condition gave her a different idea. If the stalker venom enhances human cognitive function instead of killing us, we might be able to use it intentionally. Lisa paused in her work. What do you mean? Controlled doses, Roberts explained. Not enough to cause serious injury, but sufficient to give our people the same enhanced reflexes and thinking speed you're experiencing. The idea was risky, but the logic was sound. The mining crew would be facing creatures that moved faster and thought quicker than baseline humans. Leveling the playing field might be their only chance of survival. I can synthesize the active compounds from my blood samples, Roberts continued. Create a modified version that gives the benefits without the tissue damage. Lisa ran the calculations. In her enhanced state. Do it. But start with very small doses on volunteers only. As dawn approached, the transformation of Mining Station Eco 7 was complete. The defensive positions had been repositioned according to stalker attack algorithms. The communication jammers were ready to flood the area with false signals. The modified venom enhancement was prepared for those crew members willing to risk it, but most importantly, Lisa had weaponized human unpredictability itself. Stalkers base their strategies on the assumption that prey will behave logically. She explained during the final briefing. They expect us to run when chased, hide when threatened, and fight in predictable patterns. Our advantage is that humans don't always act logically. She activated a display showing the station's modified layout. When they attack, they'll expect us to retreat to defensible positions and wait for them to overwhelm us. Instead, we're going to advance into their formation and attack their command structure directly. Marcus studied the plan with growing amazement. You want us to charge at them? Not charge, Lisa corrected. Dance. Every movement we make will be designed to violate their behavioral predictions. When they expect retreat, we advance. When they expect defense, we attack. When they expect fear, we show curiosity. The plan was insane by normal military standards, but normal military standards had failed on 17 other worlds. The stalkers had studied human tactics extensively, but they had never studied human creativity and adaptability. Under pressure, Tom activated the external sensors as the first light of dawn touched the horizon. Movement in the forest. They're beginning their approach. Lisa took a dose of the modified venom enhancement, feeling her already boosted cognitive abilities surge to even higher levels. Around her, 6 other crew members had volunteered for the treatment, their eyes bright with chemically enhanced alertness. Remember, she told them, every action you take should be unexpected. Trust your enhanced instincts over logical thinking. The venom will help you move faster than they anticipate. Through the station's reinforced windows, they could see the stalkers emerging from the forest in perfect formation. 300 creatures moving with mechanical precision, their attack patterns refined through countless victories. But they had never attacked a species that could learn from being bitten, adapt to new conditions in real time, and turn biological warfare into cognitive enhancement. Lisa activated the communication jammers, flooding the stalker network with false signals, designed to create maximum confusion. Almost immediately, the perfect formations began to waver as different groups received contradictory orders. "Phase 1 is working," Tom reported. "Their coordination is breaking down." Lisa watched the tactical display with enhanced perception, seeing patterns in the chaos that would have been invisible to unaugmented vision. The stalkers were trying to re-establish communication, but their rigid protocols made adaptation difficult. "Time to teach them about human unpredictability," she said, opening the main airlock. Instead of waiting for the attack, the enhanced defenders of Mining Station Eco 7 stepped outside to meet their enemies in the open ground. It was exactly the opposite of what the stalkers expected, and their hesitation would prove to be their first fatal mistake. The battle for humanity's survival was about to begin, and for the first time in their long history of conquest, the stalkers were about to learn what happened when they underestimated their prey. The battle began at dawn with something the stalkers had never encountered in their centuries of conquest. Instead of cowering behind fortifications, 7 enhanced humans walked calmly out of Mining Station Eco 7 to meet 300 predators in open combat. Lisa led the group, her venom enhanced, senses processing battlefield information at superhuman speed. She could see the confusion rippling through the stalker formations as their carefully programmed attack algorithms encountered behavior that didn't match any known patterns. "First wave incoming from the northeast," she called to her team. "Remember, they expect us to retreat and establish defensive positions. Instead, we advanced directly toward their command group." The modified venom in their systems gave the human defenders reflexes that bordered on precognitive. When the first stalkers lunged forward, expecting to find terrified prey, they instead met humans who moved like liquid lightning, dodging attacks. That should have been impossible to see coming. Marcus had volunteered for the enhancement despite his initial skepticism. Now he moved through the battlefield like a man possessed, his enhanced cognition allowing him to predict stalker movements 3 steps ahead. When a creature tried to flank him, he was already turning to meet it with a mining laser that cut through its carapace like paper. The false communication signals Lisa had programmed were creating chaos in the stalker ranks. Different groups received contradictory orders, sending them charging in opposite directions or causing them to hesitate at crucial moments. Their rigid command structure became a liability when the commands themselves were compromised. Tom Bradley had positioned himself near the modified laser arrays, using his enhanced perception to target stalkers with mathematical precision. The creature's attack patterns were so predictable that he could calculate exactly where they would be 3 seconds before they arrived there. "Pattern recognition is working perfectly," he called out as another beam found its target. "They can't adapt fast enough to change their approach vectors?" But the real genius of Lisa's strategy wasn't the enhanced combat abilities or the communication jamming. It was the psychological warfare of unpredictability itself. Every time the stalkers expected one response and received another, their confidence in their understanding of human nature eroded a little more. Dr. Roberts had taken a position near the station's main entrance, using her enhanced medical knowledge to target specific anatomical weaknesses in the attacking creatures. Her movements were precise and economical, each action calculated to cause maximum disruption with minimum effort. The tide of battle shifted when Lisa made direct contact with Prime, the alpha she had encountered the night before. The massive stalker had been coordinating the attack from an elevated position, but Lisa's enhanced agility allowed her to reach its location in seconds. Prime recognized her immediately, its mirror-like eyes reflecting confusion and something that might have been fear. This was the human who had allowed herself to be bitten, who had emerged stronger instead of weaker from the encounter. "You studied us for months," Lisa said, knowing the creature could understand her tone if not her words. But you never understood what you were really looking at. Prime lunged forward with its mandibles extended, but Lisa moved aside with inhuman grace. Instead of attacking back, she did something completely unexpected. She reached out and placed her hand on the creature's scarred carapace. The gesture was so far outside Stalker behavioral models that Prime froze completely, its neural processes locked in an endless loop trying to categorize the action. In that moment of paralysis, Lisa activated the portable communication device she had prepared. The device broadcast a subsonic signal using Prime's own command frequency, but the message was one of Lisa's creation. It told every stalker in the area that the attack had failed, that the humans had proven too dangerous to engage, and that immediate retreat was necessary for species survival. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. Stalkers throughout the battlefield stopped attacking and began withdrawing toward the forest. Their programming didn't allow them to question direct orders from a confirmed alpha, even when those orders came from an impossible source. But Lisa wasn't finished. As Prime struggled to understand what had happened, she activated the station's main mining charges. The explosion that followed wasn't designed to kill the retreating stalkers, but to send a message that would reach every creature within 50 kilometers. The subsonic pulse that accompanied the explosion carried Lisa's final communication broadcast on frequencies that would propagate through the planet's underground cave systems. The message was simple but devastating to Stalker psychology. Humanity had learned to turn their primary weapon into an enhancement. Humanity had infiltrated their communication systems. Humanity had defeated an attack that had never failed before. Most importantly, humanity was unpredictable in ways that made their algorithmic intelligence useless. The retreating stalkers carried that message back to their main force, and the response was swift. Long-range sensors detected massive movement in the deep forest as hundreds of creatures began a coordinated exodus from the planet. For a species that had never retreated from a hunt, abandoning an entire world was a decision that spoke to fundamental terror. The stalkers had encountered something their intelligence couldn't process, predict, or overcome. Lisa stood in the aftermath of the battle, watching the forest empty as their enemies fled. The enhanced venom in her system was beginning to fade, but the neural pathways it had created would remain permanent. She had been fundamentally changed by her encounter with the predators, but the change had made her stronger rather than weaker. Is it over? Marcus asked, his own enhancement wearing off as his adrenaline levels returned to normal. Lisa checked the long-range sensors one more time. The stalker evacuation was complete, and the subsonic communications indicated they were leaving the planet entirely. They're gone. They've designated this world as incompatible with their hunting methods. Dr. Roberts began treating the minor injuries the team had sustained, marveling at how few there were considering the odds they had faced. How is this possible? They outnumbered us 50-1. Lisa sat down heavily, feeling the exhaustion that followed enhanced cognitive function. They outnumbered us, but they didn't understand us. They studied human behavior from the outside, but they never grasped the fundamental truth about our species. Tom was already working on the communications array, preparing to send word of their victory to Colonial Command. What truth? Lisa looked back at the forest where their enemies had vanished, thinking about the price of knowledge and the value of sacrifice. Humans don't just survive by avoiding damage. We survive by learning from damage, adapting to it, and using it to become stronger. The story of Mining Station Eco 7 would spread through human space in the following months, but the real impact wouldn't be understood for years. The phrase, "she let the first predator bite her," became shorthand among frontier colonies for the kind of calculated sacrifice that defined human courage. But more importantly, the stalkers carried their own story back to whatever civilization had spawned them. Humanity had been marked in their databases with a designation that had never been used before: a species too dangerous to hunt, too unpredictable to understand, and too adaptive to defeat. Lisa's sacrifice had taught both species something fundamental about the nature of intelligence and survival. The difference was that only one of them had been willing to pay the price for that knowledge with their own blood. The stalkers had learned their lesson well, but the cost was everything they thought they knew about conquest and predation. They had encountered a species that turned weakness into strength, damage into enhancement, and fear into curiosity. In the end, the predators had become the prey, and the prey had revealed themselves to be something far more dangerous than any creature that had ever hunted them. The galaxy was a different place after Mining Station Eco 7 and the stalkers would spend the rest of their existence avoiding the species that had taught them the true meaning of the word predator. Lisa Wang had let the first predator bite her, so the others would learn the cost and the lesson would echo through the stars for generations to come.